Unleashing Leadership Potential's mobile app will enable you to view and listen to our monthly leadership conversations about leadership development through engaging with prominent ethical leaders, hearing their stories, and learning from their successes and failures. Access premium content and teachings for a small subscription fee. By downloading the app, you can access teachings from Maurice Khadebe, access monthly free content, exclusive Q&A sessions, stay up to date on our up-and-coming events. Download the app now.
Here in ULP, we want to develop a certain type of a leader. And we want to unleash the potential of that type of a leader. And I call it ULP leader because there's a lot of people now who are part of this family. And I always want to make sure that you know what we stand for. First, 5, just verify very quickly. You have spent all your talents to the best of your potential, and you have done great work. So in other words, you have really use your talents, your gifts. You have not spared anything. And you really delivered. You know, Miles Monroe says the most rich place is not the platinum gold mines, but it's the graveyard, because a lot of people go there having not really delivered on the potential that they have. So if you're a ULP leader, that's what we want. So I'm going to hold you accountable about how you are actually using your potential and delivering on it, because to me that's the mission why we are here. The second one, you've played at your zone of excellence. We don't want mediocrity here. We don't want entitlement here. We don't want you people, J.F. Kennedy said, don't ask what the government should do for you. Ask what you want to do for the government. We don't want people who are here looking for somebody to do something for them. The world owes you nothing, including South Africa. But we want you to operate at your zone of excellence and have impeccable standards. And that's what we really want a ULP leader to be demonstrated as you go outside, as you spend a lot of time with us. Some of you, we spend time with you on Saturdays here. And the third one, you must reach your highest vision. Each one of us have got a dream. And that dream, you must make sure you implement it. And we will help you, we'll facilitate it, we will mentor you, we'll coach you, but it is you to reach that dream. And you've got a real responsibility to reach that dream. Because you'll be held accountable for that dream if you do not deliver. And the world will be poorer if you don't deliver your story. And the fourth one, you build people, you didn't tear them down. And we don't want leaders that tear people down. Have you ever had a boss that really makes you feel stupid because you've made a mistake and he scolds you like a little baby? And when it comes in the morning, depends on the mood in which you are, it spoils the whole day. Finally, life is never going to be easy if you're a leader. But we want leaders who will never lose hope. Tough times are going to come. But it's only tough people that last. So that's it. I finished my part. You got it? Right. Let me really introduce you to Reuel. Dr. Reuel Khoza is a distinguished thinker. And I've seen him thinking a lot. He's a businessman. He's the president of the Institute of Directors. And I wish most of you to join this institute. Because what he's passionate about is governance, which is lacking in our state-owned enterprises, lacking in government, lacking even in corporate world. And he's very passionate about that. So if you want to know more, talk to me. I will make sure that you're part of that. He is unapologetically Africanist in his outlook because he believes that Africa's time has come. And he's do a lot of public speaking, change agent, particularly in the economic empowerment space. He's a practitioner and a theorist in the field of African leadership. And he's a role model in corporate life. I have known him in two capacities. I served with him at Wits Business School. He serves in a number of universities, as you can see, Rhodes, Free State, Stellenbosch, University of Limpopo. And then also he serves together with me at Sasol Oil. He's a member of the board, and that's an organization I chair. It's wonderful to see him in action as a corporate leader in this country. What is he doing currently? Currently, he's focusing on Zana investment. He said he's a family now. He wants to build a family investment. But also, Globelec is an organization that is focusing on energy, particularly looking at all the opportunities in the continent. As you know, that we need to get our continent energy light up, alternative energy sources, IPPs, as well as renewable energies. He's looking at that. He's been in the energy space. He was a chairman of ESCOM. When ESCOM, first the lights were on, they were never off when you were there. I remember very well. Secondly, there was not the scandals that we see now, which is very embarrassing for our nation. But he's also been the chairman of Nedbank Group. That's where he gets his strict governance. Glasgow, Smith and Klein serves on a number of boards, JSC, Old Mutual, Nampec, Liberty Life, Standard Bank, and then Sasol Oil, and we serve together there. He studied extensively. He's got a doctorate, not the honorary one. Yeah. Nami I told honorary one. Now I told her. You know, as long as I'm nominated, just it. This one, we fundele, wapali thesis. He wrote the thesis, and he studied at the University of Warwick, Rhodes University in law, on res causa, and he's a writer. Attuned leadership, let Africa lead, the African in my dream, and I've asked him to speak from the heart. So he doesn't have a set of slides, because what we found, it works very well over years now of running this, is when somebody speaks from the heart, speaks from what he's learned, from the experience, not from the textbook, and share that. And as he shares that, he'll share for about 30 minutes or so, or 40 minutes, and then we'll have enough time. So write your questions. This is a time you must make sure that you really ask the man. He's wise, he's got a lot of experience. Take the opportunity. Any question, especially those that are mentoring, I can see most of you, and you come to me and you ask me the questions. I want you to ask him so that you can get a different perspective, because sometimes when you're going to get a perspective from me only, it's not right. That's why we've structured this whole program of ULP, that you're exposed to as many leaders as possible, so that you're not a clone of one leader. And that's the most important thing. So without any waste of time, Dad, come up front. Let's give him a round of applause.
Maurice, shall I say son? Thank you very much for those very kind words of introduction. Maurice could actually have introduced me in one sentence. Here's my dad, Reuel Khoza, a retired capitalist without capital. That would have done it. Because I've been striving valiantly for, I think, close on 40 years trying to amass capital. I'm still without. But perhaps other forms of capital, Maurice could attest that I have a bit of, I try to teach at no less than 3 universities currently. I used to teach at 4 universities as a visiting professor. So perhaps that's a kind of wealth. Problem is, it's not edible. Maurice insisted that I shouldn't come come here and read you a written speech that sounds very, very intelligent. I should just talk, and then we will converse. And he suggested that, amongst others, perhaps I should make detours to the book Attuned Leadership, which I will try to do. I'll start by merely making a few observations pertaining to leadership. Now, my sense is that unethical leadership is not leadership at all. It's actually misleadership. So if you want to lead me without the requisite moral authority, chances are you will mislead me. And chances are, at my age, I will not follow you because I'll be able to see through you. So leadership is about taking people from where they are to where they have not been, but a desired destination, a desirable destination. I want to make a few observations, and then I'll talk about what I consider to be effective leaders. Let me make this observation. I was a head boy until I was about 17. So my observation is that a head boy without a head, a shepherd without sheep following him, is a wanderer. I also want to believe that vision without proper articulation, vision without committed, dedicated pursuit to realize, is a hallucination. Now, leaders. The best of leaders that I've come across are those that are very, very sound value system predicated and beckoned by a compelling vision. You've got to be anchored in sound values and be beckoned by a compelling vision. Now, a good number of the leaders that I've come across that have truly been leaders are those that have been able to articulate their sense of destiny. It is from your proper understanding and articulation of your sense of destiny that you will articulate your destination. Your destination, in other words, is your vision. Your vision is nothing but your desired end state articulated as a literary vignette, articulated as a picture painted in words. And the more clearly you paint that picture, the better it will be for you to persuade people to come along with you. When Nelson Mandela spoke about what he was prepared to die for, if needs be, but which he would like to live to realize, he articulated it so vividly that when he was beginning to campaign, people knew this was the person to follow. When Obama spoke about a sense of efficacy, yes, we can. Not only I can, but you and I can together. He actually was able to ignite the youth in the US to follow him. And he won in spite of the fact that he was the first black presidential candidate. And he won a second time. It was all to do with a sense of efficacy. The idea that I can, but meaning it. There are those who out in Polokwane in 2007 said we can. And you know they were lying. So say you can with a proper sense of efficacy. You can, and you have actually prepared for that ability. Yes, we can. When Martin Luther King articulated his campaign for the human rights in the US, he actually visualized an end state where his children were going to be judged or assessed by the content of their character and not by their pigmentation. Clear communication. So effective leaders are those who have a sense of destiny. I am here on earth for a purpose. And from that sense of destiny, I can articulate my destination, which is my vision. And I am anchored in what you would call a sound value system. When I provide leadership, I rely on moral authority. Now, when the current political leadership came to the fore, and I was called upon to comment, I said, well, perhaps they should meet the following criteria. First criterion, they should be able to deal with complexity because the world is becoming progressively more and more complex. Ability to deal with complexity. I said second criterion, they should actually to understand the phenomenon of globality and globalization. Now, what I have discovered is that a good number of them cannot even spell globalization properly. The world has become a neighborhood. You cannot think parochially. You cannot think like a villager, which I happen to be from Bushbuck Ridge, and want to lead a sophisticated political economy. You will mislead. So third thing is understand what it is you are going to lead as essentially a socio-political economy. Now the social bit might actually manifest in your ability to sing or perhaps even dance. But the complexity I'm talking about says you understand dynamics where human beings are concerned. In other words, you must have read beyond chapter 13 of a psychology textbook. You must understand economics. You must understand politics, but understand them as dimensions in perfect tango. But it doesn't just come. It takes a lot of studying. So I said, ability to deal with complexity, ability to appreciate the phenomenon of globalization and globality, and third, I said, deal with a political economy, not just politics. Because politics can be ideologically charged. You could actually thrive on slogans. You can toy, you can even dance, and you wind up being somewhat popular in the populist sense. That does not make you a leader in the 21st century. What makes you a leader in the 21st century is to be popular. Popularity and populism are two things. Popularity says you actually have something to give. I would also insist that whoever wants to lead me in the 21st century must have moral authority. Mere authority that says I can dispense largesse, I can give things, is no authority from where I sit. So I would say, fourth, if you want to lead me in the 21st century, also have moral authority. If you want to lead me in the 21st century also, you must be able to empathize. You must be able to step into my boots in my multiplicity, because I'm not one person, I'm the population. So those, I would suggest that if you're talking about leadership in the 21st century, will be some of the issues that you would have to grapple with. Maurice suggested that I make detours to attuned leadership. What is attuned leadership? What does it mean to be attuned? The adjective attuned I borrowed from music. I tried to be a musician. I studied music. I tried to conduct music. to conduct choirs, and to sing as a youngster. So I learned a few vocabularies from there. Attuned leadership comes from there. Attuned means in-tune leadership. In other words, resonating with those that you purport to lead. That's what attuned leadership is about. It has a number of dimensions. Now, those dimensions start with yourself, being self-attuned. Before you make yourself available as a leader, you must actually first do introspection. Get to understand yourself, and if you don't what it takes to be a leader, do humanity a favor. Don't step onto the plate. Second, attunement has to do with being attuned to the situation. Now, attuned situation presupposes you doing a thorough analysis of the situation and understanding it in its superficiality as well as in its depth. You cannot say, I understand people, meaning you understand people superficially. Their needs will vary and vary very extensively. The kind of followership, particularly at the national level, that you are going to provide will be providing to a very diverse and heterogeneous population. So it presupposes proper situational analysis, be attuned to the situation in its totality. Third dimension, be attuned to the needs and aspirations of the people. Because not only do they have needs and wants, they want to be taken somewhere as a nation. So be attuned to that as well as the third dimension. Be attuned also to the moral imperatives of integrity and efficacy. Be attuned as well to history. Where do you come from? Not just remembering a few dates, but studying history with a view to inform the present. And studying the present with a view to inform the future. That's historical attunement. So we have the dimensions, not so. Attuned to self, attuned to situation, attuned to the needs and aspirations of the people, attuned in a historical dimension. Now, if you are going to provide leadership in a corporate environment, what are some of the dimensions? And I've written extensively about them in attuned leadership. I'll give you a mnemonic device so that perhaps you can remember, like I remember, the key elements. The first, well, let's just mention what the mnemonic device is. It's crafty. First, your leadership will cover a raft of activities. Now, I said raft. Raft is a mnemonic device, as I see it. Raft with the R standing for responsibility. If you want to provide leadership in governance terms, you must cover a raft of activities. The first responsibility is responsibility. The second issue that you have to understand fully would be accountability. If you're going to be a leader, you will be held accountable. The F in the raft would stand for fairness. Unless you're going to be a fair leader, chances are you will erode or corrode your leadership sooner rather than later. The T stands for transparency. We have seen a lot of opacity in recent times. Our leaders are opaque. You can't read them. Now, I said it is E-crafty. The first, as it were, is a sense of efficacy, efficiency. The stance that says, I can, meaning it. The C, before the craft, stands for capability and credibility. You must be a credible being in order to provide leadership. And the last thing in I crafty is I standing for integrity. And with those, I want to believe that you will be in a position to provide proper leadership or proper governance. But those are not enough. What is it that made Mandela stand apart? I think essentially because he had presence. You also have to have gravitas. You also have to have what the Amazulu call istunzi, siriti. There are some people who are packed to the brim with knowledge, but if they said, come follow me, you would battle to follow them because they don't have the requisite gravitas. So you also have to have, in addition to that, the requisite dignity. And the dignity doesn't come freely. You actually earn it. In attuned leadership, I also write about the distinction between personality and personhood. Personality, all of us do have, even thugs have personality. It is just not a desirable personality. Personhood is what you earn by dint of behaving as a human being ideally behaves. You earn that at the interface with those that you purport to lead, other human beings. We do say in isiZulu, "Agianumuntu, hasimutu." When we say hasimutu, we don't mean you are dead. We mean you have lost the humanity. You have lost that which makes you human. In isiZulu, we also say inswelaboya. In other words, the only thing that is now remaining is for you really, if you had the skin of an animal, you'll be an animal. Inswelaboya. So earning personhood is something that you actually have to do. You earn by dint of behaving as human beings do. Those who rape, kill, pillage, use their humanhood or your personhood. So as a good leader, you must also have personhood. A good number of our leaders, due to corruption, have actually lost their personhood. That is why you have people actually asking for them to actually give way. It is personhood, not personality, that they have lost. I, at times, also use, I was saying to my grandson there that in recent times I've actually been producing music. Now, a good leader is like a good conductor. A conductor conducts people who may be excellent in playing violin. He may not be a violinist himself. Excellent in guitar, he may not be a guitarist himself. Excellent in oboe, he may not oboist himself. Excellent in all manner of instruments, wind and string instruments. But a good leader, a good conductor will actually produce rousing music by his sheer presence. So you can liken good leadership to good choral conducting or good orchestral conducting. Those are some of the elements that I felt perhaps I could mention by way of flagging the kinds of things that we might like to discuss once we get conversational. I would also like to add a few personal qualities of a good leader in the 21st century, or an able leader who is also relying on moral authority in the 21st century. First is insight. If you're talking about qualities, insight. Seeing the world from the followership's vantage point and embracing their world and their worldviews non-judgmentally, to walk, as it were, in their moccasins. Second will be inspiration. A good leader actually inspires, engendering a sense of follower self-worth, pride in current status, and hopefulness in the future. In the relationship of leader and led, it is vital to strike a balance between reality and potential, inspiration. Third dimension, I would suggest commitment. Unless you have commitment, I don't believe you are going to be able to provide leadership. You need to ardently pursue an agreed course of action, but remain willing to be flexible and respond to changes in the environment or in people's expectations. It's a dynamic relationship. Fourth, I would suggest probity. More often than not, people criticize me on probity. Probity relates to behaving in a manner that is and is seen to be beyond reproach. In reality, you're talking about a flawless leadership, and there is no such. But I am insisting that our leaders should strive for flawless leadership. That keeps them on the straight and narrow and behaving. Probity, behaving in a manner that is without reproach and seen to be without reproach. And fifth, I would say, courage. Churchill says that is, in fact, the first feature of leadership, because without courage, you can't step onto any leadership plate, neither can you actually blaze a trail. So courage, absolutely essential. I would suggest that by way of flagging what I wanted to flag, perhaps I stop there and we can engage in conversation so that I answer questions. I resonate with you as audience as opposed to pontificating, talking extra cathedral as if I was a preacher. What do you do with leadership that is effectively misleading? And you are in this current generation. The world is essentially perishing, not because there are no intelligent people, not because there are no capable people, but the world is perishing essentially because people cannot pluck up enough courage and call those who mislead to book and get them to give way so those that can lead and not mislead can step onto the plate. The question that you asked, you are a generation of my grandchildren. And the way to deal with people who mislead is to make sure that you enter the fray. I write extensively in Attuned Leadership about the intelligentsia, members of the intelligentsia. When I look at all of us here, we have had the fortune of going to school. I can read that on your faces, not because I'm a psychologist or pseudo-psychologist. You are, in fact, members of the elite. Now, what I would argue where you are concerned, as well as the others, is that by all means, stay that member of the elite, but don't be elitist. The elitists actually sit back and pontificate and talk in a manner that is intelligent, but change nothing. Now, as a member of the intelligentsia, you are capable of thinking about issues in a manner that says thought through, as opposed to jumping to conclusions. So think issues through, mobilize, organize, and catalyze. Now, what do I mean by catalyze? A good number of us actually go through life as a crucible full of elements. And if those elements just sit there as elements, nothing actually happens. They need, in order to ignite the elements in the crucible, you actually have to put catalysts. And I want to believe that all of us here are catalysts. Now, we're not going to actually check our responsibilities and say, no, let those who want to toy, and they'll change the world for us. They'll change it for the worse. So my plea with you, particularly as a young person, as articulate, who has had the fortune of joining the ranks of the intelligentsia, be a catalytic agent in a crucible full of these elements that can actually ignite for the better. The second question was good leadership is led by leaders. What might we do to avoid getting the leadership that we deserve? I think we're actually getting the leadership that we deserve. We're getting mediocrity personified. We're having leaders that actually suggest that it's still quite painful. They elevate mediocrity to a status of virtue. It is now virtuous to be average. It's even more virtuous to be below average. A good number of the people who purport to lead you now, you're a leader, but you're led by leaders who have extolled the vices of that which they uphold and made them virtuous. You have a leadership that would make it their business to recall the best of leaders who are actually doing the best that they can for our political economy. Call them home and replace them with leadership that is imbued with mouth full of teeth, who talk about economics using vocabulary that is stolen from second-rate anthropology. So as I speak, nobody actually understands them as communicating economics and finance. So your question is extremely telling. You have our leadership populated by people who are not even fit to be poor leaders. More often than not, they actually sulk. Some of them just, have a permanent sulk. and a permanent Khoza face. And they are supposed to be leading you and me. And we embrace that as if that was God-given. I don't know if I've answered your question. We can talk at long about that. The first question about how do you, if you are going to be an attuned leader, how do you avoid being absorbed? And if you're attuned, you one off in a very real sense. I tried to explain that leadership is about taking people from where you are to, in other words, having your sense of destiny and all of those kinds of things. What I would suggest about attuned leadership is that to be attuned to a situation doesn't mean you actually adapt to that situation, almost assuming the protective coloring of the chameleon. You still maintain your colors as a leader. You still maintain your characteristics as a leader, but you relate to those that you purport to lead. You bridge the divide between self and other selves, between me and community, between person and people. You make those distinctions. That way, you will not become an element in the crucible. You still remain a catalyst. A good feature of a good leader also is continual self-renewal. Imagine if I chose to stagnate, for instance, after I completed my honors at the University of the North, Limpopo. I go there quite often. Some of my colleagues actually quite stagnated in 1974. They are pathetic creatures. So you continually reinvent yourself. You resonate with those that you lead, but you continually reinvent yourself. If you stop learning today, you atrophy. If you stop learning today, just on the basis of the knowledge you have now, you actually go backwards. If you stop learning today, given the fast pace of learning, fast pace of change, you actually move at a record-breaking speed backwards. And as a leader, you're supposed to be a harbinger of change. You portend that which is to come, and not that which is in fact happening. So you resonate with those, but there are those who actually walk so fast. I know of one leader who actually walked a little too fast and became a leader in limbo. So even as you lead, maintain a healthy pace. If you move too fast, you leave those of us who are laggards behind. We lose sight of you. How do we follow you? So that's what I would suggest would be the way to go. Whatever you do, resonate, adapt if need be, but by no means adapt the protective coloring of the chameleon and become, you merge into the background. The second one, I think, had to do with financing infrastructure and financing food security. Crucial. Unless we actually do that, we continue to lag behind. But the question is, how do you make sure that the funds that should be available from banks, I was a banker in my previous life somewhere, those that actually run our development finance initiatives or institutions, that they come to the party. The problem that we have in South Africa is that banks at times are sticky. So they wind up actually doing something inimical to development. Now we have to do something about that. But development agencies in particular are very, very good at retarding progress. I'm not going to mention them by name, because I have tried to raise money from some of them, and I am told I am not talking the right kind of language. But I've studied finance, I know the phrases. I can also put an intelligent budget together, but the problem is the kind of language they're talking about. I remember meeting with somebody heading up a major fund that belongs to government. I'm not going to mention which. At the time, I had a major investment to make, and we had a World Bank come together in Tokyo. And he said, oh, let's meet over breakfast. We go and meet over breakfast. I rehearsed my presentation. It was no longer written. It was very well rehearsed in my head. I had polished all of my adjectives. And I presented a very compelling case. And he said, yeah, no, it looks like that it's feasible. But how is your relationship with the party lately? Which party? I was at my cousin's wedding. Are you talking about that party? The party. I don't quite know, but I work with everybody in wherever, whichever party you might be talking about. I interface with everybody. And this is my submission. And he winked a number of times, and I knew what the meaning of the 1,000 winks meant. And I actually did not get the money. I had a very viable Wasn't investment opportunity. Now, what do we do if you and I believe in food security? Critical. Infrastructure, critical. We have to begin to realize that we're living in a neighborhood. If a development finance institution in South Africa doesn't quite stack up, you can go to Oslo. I was in Oslo last week, even at 70. I mean, you're half my age. So you can go there, put your case. The Norwegians are amongst the wealthiest and the most generous in the world. But unless you actually scout the environment, you won't even discover that. So I want to believe that what you might need ultimately is what bankers and people of that ilk call blended finance. If you can get development finance from the likes of your CDC, from the likes of your Norwegian fund, and then use that to leverage funds with the banks here, you might wind up with something that could actually be adequate to addressing some of your requirements. And that way, you blaze a trail, that way you provide attuned leadership. How do you avoid getting too operational? So who asked the question? Yes. Particularly if you are running a small organization. Well, at the beginning, you get very operational. I started, after leaving the company that he got to manage after I left Shell, I went into consulting. And as the initial consultant, I only had 4 colleagues. So I had to enter the fray. So much so that, in fact, in due course, many of those companies that we consulted to, if I was not present, there was no consultancy. Now, that's the risk you run of getting too operational, too involved and not delegating. In fact, that brings me to the answer. You delegate. Supposing you were 10 and you were the most able, make sure that you train and multi-skill your colleagues such that, in fact, they could even surpass you, and delegate to them. Now, there's a distinction you need to make between delegating and offloading. Many of us who have subordinates, instead of delegating to them, we offload. Well, you just dump the stuff on them. Delegating means there is still a link. Where you can help by exception, you still help by exception, but you don't delegate and take over again. That's another pitfall. So you delegate, never come to usurp, but at the same time, don't offload. Work together as a team. I've tried it. If you want to come and see it in operation, come and visit me in Keepers Hall in Nelspruit. My family runs an avocado farm. We employ about 350 people and export kind of big time, We export for both for ourselves and for neighboring farmers. Last year and the year before, we were rated the 2nd largest exporter of avocados to Europe. And the Netherlands eat our avocados, they also on-sell to Russia. And you work with I've worked with a bigger group. At NetBank, I was working with 32,000. Even there, it's delegation and not offloading. I delegated to something like 12 senior executives. I didn't offload, but we worked together. Where I could complement them, I complemented them. So even if you are 3, even if you are 5, even if you are 10, the principles apply. You can't do everything. It's not possible. you will burn out. Have you experienced the phenomenon called burnout? Yeah. You are tired, but not sufficiently tired to collapse. You're just sufficiently tired to be unproductive. So avoid burnout. Delegate. Avoid offloading. The question on technology is so crucial. I would not have a very ready answer, but your key problem is how do you even make yourself understood to those that are supposed to be enablers, that are supposed to have the enabling policies even, and that are supposed to stand to lead the way and not be blocking your way when you want to go innovative and when you want to apply technology. My sense is that as you begin to realize critical mass, technology is just, by its very nature, unstoppable. There is a sense in which even if you wanted to kill the Uber drivers, you can't finish them because they are not a taxi operation. They are a technology at work. So the hope that you have, I believe, is that your technology actually can permeate even walls. They can cause bureaucracies to crumble. When I grew up, we actually were very, very worried about, hey, we want land. Your technology innovators, how much land do they own? They own the globe. So what I can say by way of encouraging you is that your regulatory confines are meant for the myopic. The truly innovative don't even see that. They just innovate anyhow. You can't arrest the innovation. Neither can you actually arrest the person themselves. Bill Gates doesn't need to have a country. I mean, the world is his oyster. Elon Musk, the guy from Pretoria, has the world as his oyster. If you talk to me nicely, I could take you to my alma mater, because I was there 2 weeks back to give a graduation address. And they say, Warwick Manufacturing Group would like to work with innovators in South Africa. Do you think you can put together a group of innovative youngsters? So the world, your point of reference is not, hey, is it useful for me to know the SG? You don't have to know the SG. He is irrelevant in your innovation. So that's the little encouragement I could give you. Making room for female leadership. It's so important. Historically, we got used to believing that there are things that are just meant for men. It's a fallacy. But having realized the fallacy, what are we doing about it? And what are them ladies also doing about it? When I was at ESCOM, I'm talking about the ESCOM of yore. Yore is old English for those days. In order to address the challenge that we are posing definitively, we put aside a budget to train women in a good enough number. We recruited from outside of ESCOM and very few from ESCOM, ladies with BSc degrees, and put them on a program at Warwick, my alma mater, to go and study engineering. And we paid them fully whilst they were out there, and we guaranteed them employment when they came back. 39 of those came back with very good passes, a few of them with flying colors. And we deployed, I hate the word deploy. We actually employed them within ESCOM, but we allowed them to actually go and work for other companies. What I would suggest is that it is not enough to merely say our policy is equal employment. Our policy is gender equity. We actually have to move ahead and do practical things. And I try to do the same even at Nedbank. If you look at the top echelon, the second in command at Nedbank, it's a lady. And she makes no apologies. When I appointed her, she has the CA, but there was a white lady with a CA who had more experience. And I said, it is this one that we're getting to be the finance director. And some of my fellow directors on the board said, no, but you're skipping something. And I said, well, if you want to have your fellow Mlungu, that's fine. I'm on my way out. I don't have to work for you. And they got the message. We got her employed. She is doing great work. And I'm merely mentioning her as one example. I'm saying there are numerous examples. And the way to make sure that you make way for them is to also help them, give them a leg up, and then create the employment by way of, I remember when I joined Old Mutual in the UK, there was not a single lady on the board, a board of 9. And they said they couldn't find them. And I said, well, I represent Nedbank. That's 54% of your company. If you can't find women, go and make them. I want to see them next year. And now, 40% or 50% of the board of Old Mutual PLC is women. No less than 3 of those are actually African women, one from here in South Africa, another originally from Nigeria. The one from South Africa, you probably know, Nkunyembezi. I recruited her there. They said, there were no women. I said, next time I come to the board meeting, I'll bring you one. And I'll make her talk. I won't talk. She's not the kind of person that defers to any man. So she got there, wowed them, and within months, she was on the board. So how do we create? You do it by actually taking bold steps. You cannot be limp-wristed about it. You cannot be limp-ankled about it. When you mean to walk, walk. Anybody who stands on the way falls. Even the British fall. Old Mutual PLC, deracialized, gender sensitive. And then we have got problems with the continent. We had the Renaissance man. You remember the Renaissance man? Yeah. And the people that he worked with did a super job. I can tell you that. I'm not going to talk about HIV/AIDS. I'm going to talk about the Renaissance. He had done a super job. The AU, his handiwork. The biggest problem that we have as Africans is that if we are succeeded by people, those that succeed us, if we have irritated them just a little bit, they don't build on the foundation that we have laid. Yeah. They destroy and start from zero. Yeah. That is why the AU right now is so wobbly. If I asked you who is the leading light in the AU today, can you mention a name? It will be very, very difficult. Essentially because they stand for very, very little. And they actually show no real dedication. Now, what might we do? I don't know. Perhaps you might recall the immediate past the head of commission. I don't believe our compatriot delivered much, or so I'm told when I go to Ethiopia. So what do we do? There are people who are adequately prepared amongst us. We actually have to find ways of actually stepping onto, it's not going to be easy, stepping onto the plate. If you're talking about a Pan-Africanist, you got to produce Mbeki. If you want to talk truly about the NEPAD, you got to talk about a Kwame Nkrumah of today. You have to talk about a Kenyatta of today. You got to talk about Brother Mugabe of 1980s. Now, there is a sense in which one of our fundamental flaws is to allow people to be president for life. Bob Mugabe, first 10 years, best leader worldwide. He could stack up worldwide. Produced educated people that actually have problems melt in front of their eyes. The chartered accountants that we have here, a good number of them are actually Zimbabweans, and they do a super job. Co-head of Sasol. In fact, that's another area where if you are bold, you actually get your way. When Dr. Willem Kok was very, very good at Eskom, we never fired people at Eskom during my time. We kind of managed them out. So when he was managed out to create space, they wanted him to be succeeded by another white person. So they couldn't find a black person. I said, don't waste my time. Go and find him. Make him. Make him fast. And I'm not filling this position, but this position shall be filled in 3 months. So make sure that we find somebody. And it is your colleague that we found. I recruited Ngobaba to that position, and he hit the ground running. And guess what? He was a chartered accountant. He had also run finance and treasury, where he came from. His predecessor was just an economist. Now, that combination is superior to an economist. We pseudo-economists, I've got a pseudo-doctorate in economics. It was given to me by Free State the other day. We economists just use words. Chartered accountants just do work. Those who have actually had practical experience in finance and treasury do even more work. And so when he came in, he hit the ground running. So I'm suggesting that if you're talking Continental, the criteria should be essentially the same. It must be somebody with a sense of efficacy, but it should not be a false sense of efficacy. It must be something that says, I can, meaning you can. Not I can because I can do, but I can because I can really deliver. And that should be counter. I've worked with Nigerians. I've gone to school with them. So if we had time and you kind of reined me in so that I don't become slanderous, we could talk about Nigerians. We could talk about Ghanaians. Ghanaians, I worked with a good number of Ghanaians in the area of financial services, particularly banking. If you go to New York, you see somebody that looks like a South African. Chances are he's a Ghanaian, and he's doing a super job in the area of finance. So all we need to do is to find one another, mobilize, and be catalytic. Shezi spoke about voter psychology. I made one mistake of moving away from psychology. Perhaps I should have studied that some more. I read that for 7 years. I know mob psychology. It is no different from voter psychology. A mob, as you and I know, is a monster. Heads enough, but very little brains. So the biggest problem that we have, Shezi, about our voting here is that we actually we're headed like non-thinking creatures. We still owe it to people who liberated us. So there is still a liberation dividend that we have to pay to these liberators. A good number of these liberators, by the way, I met when I was studying in the UK in the 80s, in the 70s. A good number of them were just getting drunk there. And I actually told them, if you are the liberator, I stay in bondage. Don't liberate me. But voter psychology, amongst other things, the things that sweep many voters off their feet is this liberation dividend. People don't have to be really good. They just have to say, you know, I was part of the struggle. I struggled for you. You tell them I was also struggling. Somehow they don't understand that. I mean, we got fired from university. I was teaching. I was a budding psychologist at the University of Limpopo, but I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Or as my educational psychologist put it, why don't you shut up your mouth quietly? I didn't shut up my mouth quietly, so I got fired. But what I'm suggesting, Shazi, is that voter psychology is something that we actually have to deal with. Get to understand that feeling must be tempered with reason. And the only people who can do that are members of the intelligentsia, we who are here. We shouldn't just be preoccupied with, hey, do I have enough to eat today? If you don't have enough to eat, just befriend me. I will feed you avocados for a month. Thank you very much.
Any closing remarks?
Closing remarks, perhaps. Let's recap on what attuned leadership is. There's one paragraph that I believe captures that. I could just read you that, and then we could get informal. This is at the introduction of my book. Leaders are not just born to the role. They are born, then made. And sometimes unmade by their own actions. A leader who is not attuned to his or her followers soon becomes a leader in limbo and invariably then fails. Connectedness, compassion, empathy, integrity, humility, reasonableness, and a determination to be effective are the keys to attuned leadership. An attuned leader who is truly attuned to his or her followership can step boldly ahead into an uncertain future with a certainty that the followers will lend their support. So that, in a nutshell, is attuned leadership. Those who want to familiarize themselves with more can get copies and read through with a view to discussing. And if you believe I've committed enough sins in the book, you are free to lynch me. And as a son of a preacher, I am also ready to be crucified, provided you guarantee me resurrection. Thank you very much.
So an ethical leader looks at what significance am I going to make? That's how he measures himself or herself. Significance in terms of the people, the impact I'm going to make in the lives of people, and how am I going to develop people, how I'm going to make them to achieve their talents and potentials and really achieve their significance in life. And that is a more valuable measurement that one you need to put in.
You really have to know the difference between right and wrong. In your life, you have to know the difference between right and wrong. You do wrong things, they will catch up with you. If you perhaps unfortunately pass away, they will catch up with your children.
There are choices that we make for ourselves every single day. Every single day, we are faced with this choice versus that choice. And you've got to really think about your choices, about your life and how you manage your life and your career and your aspirations and what you want to do with yourself. It is a really active process. Every day, at least I believe so, every day it's about actively managing what I want to do.
When you sit down and you face your day, just be sure of what your compass needle is telling you. What is your direction? What are your values? Remember those. That is your guide. And if you make decisions, all of your decisions in relation to your matrix of values, then you'll be okay. You'll do the best you can. That's the best you can do. You can't do better than that.
We must know what we stand for. We must know what we represent. We must know what we want to achieve. And we must be able to extricate ourselves so that we don't believe that we become infallible or irreplaceable.
But integrity is wholesomeness. So that what you think, say, and do, it's one and the same thing. You don't show up differently. That what people see is what they get. They don't have to second guess you.
Leadership is service. It's selfless service of the people that you lead. It is owning the decisions that you make. It is being humble enough to recognize the mistakes that you make.
So you must be able to build that self-recovery mechanism within you to always bounce back, to never allow people to write you off, and because you remember what I said, that your dream may be delayed, but it can never be denied.
So we're pioneering, we're bold, we are ever evolving, we are ever innovating. Very, very important characteristics, in my view, for an entrepreneur. If you want to remain relevant and stay ahead of the pack, just because you were the best yesterday doesn't mean you're going to be the best tomorrow. So you have to constantly be challenging yourself and saying, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? What am I going to do differently tomorrow? What new product am I going to bring in? So that when your competition is trying to catch up with you, you've moved on, you are one step ahead.
We can all say that we have values, but it's only seeing how we behave we can tell if those values are working or not. There's a very important connection. Behaviours are so much more visible in terms of how people do things.
And along the way, you will have all sorts of barriers. You will have barriers of financial resources. You will have barriers of not even have enough knowledge in the subject that you want to handle. But if you stick to the plan and you are enthusiastic enough, sufficiently enthusiastic, then you are going to achieve your goal.